Hello, and thank you for watching. Most of us know about the financial crisis that we find ourselves in today, but many may be hazy on the mindset and events that got us here. Today we will be taking a look at some of the data from the past 5 years and the actions that set us on our current path. This is the financial crisis, the event. History has shown us that we must learn from our mistakes. The human race has seen the decline of several empires, and many times it begins with the expansion of debt and a financial crisis. It ends with an unstoppable reduction in the resources available for our national defense. But don't worry, things aren't that bleak yet. Even though it is highly unlikely this would happen to the U.S. anytime soon, it is a reminder that we must learn from and not repeat what has happened in recent years. Many different aspects are to blame for our most recent recession, even though many people want to point the finger at just one. Most of us have heard many of the reasons that contributed to where we are now, and they most likely include some of the following: collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps, frozen credit markets, deregulation. This all may seem like a big complicated mess with many attributing factors, which it kind of is, but don't let it overwhelm you. In a few decades we have seen our financial system gravitate towards a base and speculative debt, which is a huge part of shadow banking. One that is made possible by modern technology combined with generalized concept and overly complex mathematical formulas. These formulas may work for some things, but as soon as stuff starts to get complicated, the formulas don't work, and bad things happen. Besides important financial people trying to predict the unpredictable, other things like easy money led people and businesses into thinking things were going great and only going to get better. I say easy money because after the dot-com bubble busted, the Fed decided to help out by lowering the Fed's fund rate from 6.5% in 2000 to 1% in 2003. This lowered rate made cheap money for everyone, and people started buying things like houses. The more houses people bought, the more houses were built. Banks and mortgage companies saw this and started giving cheap money away to almost anyone, even those who would normally be eligible or not eligible. All these money-making loans stacking up, banks and mortgage companies innovated new ways to make even more money off this market. With the prospect to make a lot of money at the helm, banks and mortgage companies came up with the idea to put their good loans with their not-so-good loans and sell them to investors. To make it seem like a good deal, they went to companies like AIG and insured these packaged loans, or the CDOs, to guarantee that they would get paid off. Companies like AIG insured these debts for a premium by promising to pay the companies if the investors defaulted, or the credit default swaps. Programs using complex mathematical formulas also incorrectly told banks and rating agencies that these investments were safer than what they really were. Before mortgage companies and banks could sell the CDOs, they had to be stamped off by the rating agencies. The rating agencies didn't see the huge risk that were in these packages, and if they did, they didn't want to rain on anyone's parade or lose out on the money being made, so they stamped most of these packages AAA, or safe. With GDP still rising past 13 billion, the unemployment rate being okay at 4.6%, and the housing market continuing to grow, things looked good, and no one knew what they were getting themselves into. Now, because of the incorrect pricing of risk, investors all over the world had these CDOs, which we know now were toxic debts. Some people had an idea that things could go wrong, but no one was able to push change, saw, or wanted to see what was on the horizon. In 2006, things started to change in part due to the Fed's fund rate slowly rising from 1% in 2003 to an average of 4.96% in 2006. Now money was no longer easy to get, and as you might think, this was not good for all those people and businesses that base their finances off of easy money. Mortgages and banks began losing money and started hiking their adjustable rate mortgages higher and higher. This was done more so for the subprime loans. This rate hike made home values stop increasing and even start decreasing. Home values are still decreasing today, with some areas seeing decreases from 15 to 30%. As home values decreased, people started noticing that their homes weren't even worth what they owed. Instead of worrying how to make the house payment, people started defaulting on their loan. To make matters worse for people hitting hard times, oil prices and other commodities tripled in price from 2007 to 2008, creating a commodities bubble on top of the housing market bubble. Just when people began to fear what lay ahead, things started going downhill. All the toxic debt started to seep out of the supposedly good package deals that had been sold with AAA ratings, and investors from everywhere started scrambling to sell their CDOs, but no one wanted them. Banks had to use their reserves to pay for all these bad assets, and some were in so deep that they were headed to collapse. Investors started to see that their allegedly secure investments were not that secure, so they stopped buying those stocks and started selling them. Banks become reluctant to lend money, not only to people but also to their fellow banks. This fear or uneasiness in the financial system spread like most fears do. So banks and subprime lenders begin to collapse and credit markets begin to freeze. People and investors started to make a run on the banks and their investments, which made it even harder for these big businesses to get out of the red. People not only started losing their money, but also their jobs. And the only thing on the rise was unemployment, which had reached a staggering 9.7% as of January 2010. The Fed started dropping the Fed funds rate in 2007 to help stabilize things, and now it's at an almost non-existent 0.11%. This drop in the Fed's fund rate, along with the government taking control of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, government-forced mergers, and a huge bailout was what it took just to begin to get things back on track. These stabilizing measures, along with new credit laws being passed to help stop predatory lending, is a step in the right direction, but much more still needs to be done. The deregulation that helped get us to this point is still in great need of being addressed, and the effects of this recession will still be felt for years to come. All we can do and hope for is that the recession is taken as a lesson it should be. We must remember the unpredictability of the human element, as it will always be a factor in economics. As people, we sometimes lower our guard about potential risk on the high hopes of huge future returns. A lot of times we buy on emotion. When we feel safe, we spend more. And when times are uncertain, we hold on to our money. Some things we can do can be predicted, but some financial masterminds bet too much on different ways to predict the behavior of people and markets. Humans are just that, humans, and there is a chance that some of us can become corrupted. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to maintain an objective point of view, no matter the profit to be made. The future will not run perfect, and there are bound to be more recessions, but we must learn from the events so we are not doomed to repeat them. We cannot afford to repeat these mistakes, or we chance leaving the U.S. to become just another chapter in the history books, alongside other fallen empires of the past.